Do you see my screen?
Yes, Monica.
Yes.
In presentation mode? Okay, because I have to screen, I'm always... okay. I can't see now you, and if there are people that are joined, so if you think we are in a good number, I can start. If not, tell me if I have to wait a bit.
Well, I'm not sure. I think I see 24 people. Maybe we can start.
Yeah. Okay, so let's start. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this E3S Children Working Group webinar entitled Tiny Tastes, Big Challenges, Advances in Sensory Methodologies with Children, Recent Insights and Applications. We are very pleased to see so many participants joining us today from different institutions and countries. I'm Monica Laureati from the University of Milan, and today with my co-chair Pernilla Sandvik, we will guide you through this session. Pernilla, please, if you want to.
Yes. Hello, everyone. I'm glad to see so many people here as well, and I hope we'll have some fruitful hours discussing sensory methodology with children.
Yeah. So as the webinar is open to everyone, we thought that it might be relevant to quickly introduce our society. So today we are lucky because we have our E3S chair, Professor Sara Spinelli from the University of Florence, from the speakers. So I invite Sara to shortly introduce our society. Sara, please.
Yeah, thank you, Monica, and Pernilla for organizing this event. Just a quick few words to introduce E3S for those of you that are not involved yet or not member yet. So E3S is a society of societies of National Sensory Science Organization, and it has the objective to promote cooperation and knowledge information exchange on the topics related to sensory and consumer science. It has now 15 members, and I think we can go. Yes, so it has now 15 members in the different countries. And it's very active. So if you are a member of the society, of the National Society, you are automatically member of E3S. So consider this, and you can be more active in the society. And you can work in different working groups. This one of children is one of the first that was funded, and it is now led by Monica and Pernilla. But there are also others that are focused on different topics. For example, taste sensitivity and personality, then beyond food, texture perception and oral processing, that is led by Paula and Amparo, that are also here today, and PDO product working group. So just consider that you can be active in the different working group and the activities of E3S. So I'm happy to leave the floor to the organizer, that we will tell us also more about the event today, and it's very good to have this connecting opportunities. And also don't forget that we will have the next E3S symposium in March 26-27 in Switzerland, organized by the local organizer, the Swiss Sensory Science Society. Thank you.
Thank you, Sara. Thank you very much.
And I forgot, celebrating our 15th anniversary. So it's also important to remember this.
Time goes fast, Sara.
Yes.
So thank you so much for the introduction of our society. Now it's the turn of our working group. So very quickly, it is active since 2013, and the main goal is to facilitate the exchange of research-based knowledge on the mechanisms influencing children's sensory perception and food preferences. Currently, we have 45 members from all the 15 countries belonging to the society, including academia and non-academia institutions. Over the years, we have organized many activities, including workshops, meetings, webinars, and we are especially proud about a research project that was the BTEX project, a collaborative and cross-national project on texture perception in children. It was a very productive project in terms of networking activities, but also publications, as you can see. So we are quite an active working group, and we are always open to new collaborations. So if you want to join our working group, as Sara said, if you are a member of your own national society, you're automatically a member of the E3S. So you only have to send us an email, and we will add in the mailing list. Yeah, I think that we can go deep in the today's program. So I give the floor to Pernilla for a few information about the organization of today's webinar.
Yes, thank you so much, Monica. And here you see the schedule of today's meeting, and we have already started with the opening and introduction. And soon Monica will give us an historical overview of sensory methods with children, and thereafter a presentation by me will follow, focusing on rapid sensory methods with children. We are also very happy to have Paula Varela with us from Nofima and Noelia Da Quinta from AZTI in Spain. And they will talk about measurement of food-related emotions and attitude, physiological, implicit, and explicit methods. And finally, we also have Sara Spinelli and Caterina Dinnella from University of Florence in Italy. And they will give us a presentation on co-creation approaches with children. And finally, we have some time for questions and answers and open discussions. So if you have any questions during the talk, you can use the Q&A function, and you find it in the meeting tools in the menu down to the right, and you just choose Q&A, and there you can post your questions. And I think we will have time to answer some quick questions in between the talks. In the end, we will leave time for an more open discussion, and you can either raise your hand and ask your question or write questions in the Q&A function. And finally, I just want to remind everyone that we are recording this meeting and will publish it through E3S channels later on. So with that said, I want to welcome back Monica Laureati, University of Milan, and she will give us a presentation of what has happened with and how methods with children in sensory field has developed during the last decades. So go ahead, Monica.
Yeah, switch to my presentation. Please let me know if you see it in presentation mode.
It looks good.
Okay, thank you so much for confirmation. So I'm very pleased to open this webinar by giving an overview of how sensory research with children has evolved over the last 4 decades. And first of all, let me start by quickly introduce why it is so relevant to have children as tasters in sensory science. We all know that children are, of course, the consumers of the future, and understanding their sensory world is important to shape healthy and sustainable food habits early in life. Children also represent a vulnerable population group who need foods that are not only nutritionally balanced, but also sensorially accepted. They are in a very critical phase of growth, so this is very important. And both children and adolescents play an increasingly important role in shaping household food choices and purchasing decisions. And last but not least, children are not only merely small adults. They differ from adults in many aspects, including sensory perception, expectations, needs, and preferences, and therefore require specific methodologies adapted to their developmental stage. So if we move to analyze how sensory research with children has evolved over the time, and we focus on three main periods, and if we look back to before the 2000s, in this period there was limited interest in sensory testing with children, and the products targeted at children were commonly tested by adults. And we know that this is a malpractice because they are so different from adults. And as a consequence, there was a limited scientific literature and methodological knowledge in that period. And also in this period, the first child-friendly methodologies began to appear. The first methods targeted to children were reviewed in this period by Guinard in 2001. I think that this is a milestone paper, a milestone article in sensory research with children. And in this period, the review was based mainly on discussing critically how to adapt the existing method to children, with emphasis on age-related aspects, but also cognitive development and how to adapt the methods, and also the ethical aspects related to involving children in sensory science. From a methodological perspective, the focus was on preference, adaptability, and discrimination abilities. If we look at the focus of this review article, you can see that the methods that were reviewed were quite small in number, including some discrimination methods and a few consumer testing. So these reduced number also reflect the limited interest that there was in research with children, and this may also be explained by the fact that doing research with children in that period was very challenging. It is also now very challenging, but it was even worse in the past. And if we move to this, the second period from 2000 to 2015, in this period, the market for child-oriented food products expanded considerably. And also the academic field demonstrated the feasibility of sensory and consumer testing with children. Many sensory tests were found to be suitable for them, if, of course, appropriate methods were used, child-friendly methods were used. And as a consequence, there was a rapid research expansion in this field. And this led to the development and the validation of more complex approaches tailored to children, and an increased attention was given to age and method suitability. This period was also reviewed, and this is a review article in which the focus was also the transition in research challenges from the past to what was then the present. And from 2000 to 2015, the research challenges were mainly focused on the optimization of the sensory and hedonic methods for children, with application mainly in R&D, product reformulation, and also applying methods to moving toward a healthier and more sustainable diet for children. So also applying educational programs to meet this goal. In this review, the number of traditional methods that were critically reviewed increased compared to the previous review. So we see different methods that were added. And there were also those that at the time were considered innovative and emerging methods like projective mapping techniques, for instance, implicit paradigms to study incidental learning and memory for food. There was the first mention to Chekhov that apply methods for evaluating food-related emotions, and also other implicit methods such as observational studies and physiological measurements. So we see that the number of methods increased in this period. And then if we move to the last period, from 2015 to present, in this period, it is well established that children can provide results as reliable as adults do when appropriate methods are used. So this is imperative. And as a consequence, research has progressively moved toward more sophisticated approaches. And also the role of children in product development has shifted from passive to active. Also considering that approaches like co-creation have been developed and successfully tested with children. However, adolescents still remain a poorly investigated target of the population. This period has been reviewed by this recent review that is currently under review, so fingers crossed. In this review, it is a narrative review indeed, from the beginning of 2015 to the end of 2024. And in this review, we included children starting from the age of 4 until 17 years. So we also included adolescents. In this narrative review, beside the methodological perspective, we focused also on sensory systems development across lifespan. We provided best practices for reliable testing with children. And again, in this review, we critically discussed the classical methodological approaches as well as emerging methodological approaches. So concerning the traditional ones, we have again additional methods that have been tested and more or less validated with children, such as complex hedonic scale, 9-point, 15-point hedonic scale, unstructured hedonic scale, A, not A, methods, both as discriminant and hedonic methods, and then a list of emerging techniques. You see how many they are and how complex they are. So all these methodology have been tested with children. I won't spend so much words on this because most of this methodology will be the focus of the following talks. I would like just to make a very quick overview of the frequency of applications of these emerging techniques in children as a result of our paper. And we observed that the methods that has seen the highest expansion was for sure the Chekhov that apply, used both as a rapid descriptive techniques, but also as a tool to explicitly assess food-related emotions in children. Other methods that were largely used were co-creation approaches, and on the contrary, less explored methods were grateful that apply, and also temporal techniques like TCATA and TDS, probably because these are very complex methods and the research is still limited in this field. So as I said, I don't want to add too much information on this method because my colleague will do so in a few minutes. I just want to jump to the future research perspective based on this analysis of the literature. So I can say that much has been done until now in sensory testing with children, but much can be done again. And the first point is that when we apply methods to involving children, the imperative is to always carefully adapt sensory methods to children's cognitive abilities. And so age is an important variable to consider when applying sensory methods with children. But if I can add something, even if we are involving children that usually perform well with sensory science, it is always very important to look for inter-individual variability within a certain age, because children, especially if they are young, so primary school children, I would say, they can vary very much in verbal skills, cognitive skills, and so on. There are some techniques that still need further validation, like co-creation techniques. And on this point, I think that there is still some confusion about what the co-creation techniques are, but I think that Sara and Caterina will touch these points. And also these complex methods, right, that apply temporal kata and temporal dominance of sensation, they are very complex even for adults. So if we want to approach these methods also for children, it's very important to demonstrate the feasibility. And last but not least, adolescents remain an understudied population in sensory and consumer research, so it is recommended to explore this consumer target in future research. So let's say I thank you very much for your attention. I'm very happy to answer questions if there are now or at the end of all presentations. I can't see if there are questions.
No, thank you so much, Monica. Jonah, do we have any questions in the Q&A right now?
Not for the moment.
Not for the moment. Okay, thank you so much.
Just for a moment, I try to to stop sharing.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, so I can introduce Pernilla, that will now present a talk on measurements of food-related perceptions, alternative rapid techniques for product characterization with children.
Thank you. Does it look okay?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so today I'll talk about rapid techniques for product characterization with children, and I'm Pernilla Sandvik from Uppsala University in Sweden. And working with children in sensory research is both fun and demanding, and I will touch up on different factors that are important to take in consideration when applying rapid sensory descriptive methods with children. And I will give you examples of 2 case studies where different rapid methods have been applied. So both the most common that Monica mentioned, kata, and then one that is less common, napping. So what are some of the challenges that needs to be taken in consideration when doing descriptive analysis with children? Well, first of all, children has a more limited attention span compared to adults. We need to make sure that the task is fun, engaging, and not too time-consuming. Moreover, children are still developing their cognitive, verbal, and writing skills. Thus, it's important to design the task to the abilities of the involved children. So classical methods such as descriptive analysis with a trained panel are not suitable for young consumers. So instead, we need child-friendly, rapid, and more intuitive methods. So perhaps rapid sensory methods could be a suitable option when working with children. So first, I want to give you some background to rapid descriptive methods. So rapid techniques for product characterization has been around for quite some years now, and they address a need for a faster and more adaptable alternative to conventional descriptive analysis. And rapid method has been described as a way to democratize sensory evaluation and make it more accessible. So when is it described as suitable to choose rapid methods in the literature? Well, It can be related to practical reasons, such as budget and time. It can be related to the type of product that is evaluated and its availability, but also to the subjects involved. For example, when including consumers in the evaluation, having short time with the subjects, or involving subjects with limited cognitive abilities. Thus, it seems like a way to go when working with children. So rapid sensory methods may not provide as detailed results as conventional descriptive sensory methods, but it might be the right choice of method depending on what questions you want to answer with your test. So the rapid methods can provide approximate descriptive profiles or approximate holistic mapping of the products evaluated. And rapid sensory methods can also be used with untrained consumer, thus it's closer to the consumer. And consumer-oriented approaches in product innovation and development is used more often nowadays. And when using these methods, we do compromise accuracy a little bit in favor for consumer orientation. However, this might be exactly the information we want. So traditionally in sensory evaluation, it was custom to only collect hedonic data from consumers. But when applying a rapid descriptive methods, we assume that consumers can go from a more global and sometimes unconscious sensory image to a more analytical mode of thinking. And we also assume that consumers can separate the different sensory attributes apart. And when applying these methods with children, we also assume that children can do this. But studies have shown that results are often useful and even similar to those from trained panels. And further on, comparing results from adults and children using certain rapid methods, the results are also quite similar between adults and children, as I will show you in one of the case studies presented. So with regards to rapid descriptive sensory method, we can group these into 4 main categories: scaling, mapping, ranking, and checking. So examples of methods include free choice profiling and flash profiling. And these 2 techniques are similar in the sense that respondents choose their own attributes and score or rank them. There is, however, limited data on children using these types of methods. Napping and sorting napping, which is also called projective mapping, sometimes in the literature, or flash profiling. This I will show you a case on later on in the presentation. Check all that apply, or CATA, is the method most used with children as of today, as Monica mentioned, and I will show you an example of this as well. Rate all that apply is actually similar to check all that apply, but respondents are asked to rate the attributes instead of only checking them. And T-kata is a measurement of temporal dominance of sensation. So data on the use of RATA and T-kata with children is, as of today, more limited. So I want to provide 2 examples of studies where kata and sorted napping has been used, and I will start with the kata. And first of all, a little bit more background on the kata method. So this is one of the most applied rapid methods for children. And here's how it works. First, we create a list of sensory terms covering the sensory modalities, and it's also possible to include other non-sensory attributes here in the list. In the tasting session, products are served monadically, and the participants are asked to look at the list of attributes and then check all the terms they think describe the sample they've just tried. And the samples should be served in balanced order, of course, but we also want the kata terms to be randomized for the samples and in between the participants. So here, no intensity rating is needed, which of course reduces the cognitive load for the participants. And when this data is combined with multivariate analysis, Kata can produce sensory maps similar to those from a trained panel, and I will show you an example of this. And if we also add liking scores in the evaluation, we can actually identify drivers of liking. So this method is quite simple, intuitive, and works well from around 8 years old, provided, and this is important, that the vocabulary used is age appropriate and that the children understand the kata terms, the words that are included. So here, pilot testing is essential to make sure that the children understand the terms used. So this is super important. And insights from research shows that children can discriminate samples using the kata. And now I will show you some results. So in this study, both children and adults evaluated 6 crackers, and 5 of these had some amount of algae in them. And the first thing you usually do with the data from kata evaluation is to check whether the respondents use the specific kata attributes to differentiate between the samples. And here in our study on crackers with algae, we could see that, for example, the attribute thick appearance, the second one from the bottom, was used by the adults to differentiate between the samples, but not by the children. So that is usually the first thing you do when you evaluate the information from the kata task. And here you can see some more results. To the left, you can see the sensory space based on children's evaluation of the crackers using the kata. And to the right, you can see results from the adults. And these children were 8 to 11 years old. And here you can see that the sensory space looks quite similar comparing children and the adults. The samples have basically the same placements in relation to each other and the attributes as well. And as a next step, we also combine the information from the kata with evaluation of liking using a 7-point hedonic scale with smileys for the children. And here you can see on the top the findings for children, and at the bottom you have the findings for the adults. And using penalty analysis, we could identify the attributes that were most important in driving liking and disliking for these samples. And here we could see a difference between children and adults. So for example, green color was an important driver of disliking for the children, as you can see in the red box on the plot here. But on the opposite, for adults, green color was actually a driver of liking of these crackers. So this was an example of some of the results you can get from applying check all that apply methods. So let's move on to another method, napping. So napping is a holistic sensory method where participants position products on a 2-dimensional space, such as a sheet of paper. And the placement should be based on perceived similarities and differences of the samples. So items close together are considered similar, and those far apart are considered different. So this will generate a perceptual map that reflects the overall sensory impressions of the samples. And this method can capture holistic perceptions without requiring detailed vocabulary. However, participants can also be asked to use their own words to motivate the placement of their samples. So this is called sorted mapping, or sometimes projective mapping in the literature. So note that for this method, as compared to the kata method, here we need to present all samples simultaneously. Thus, it might increase the risk of sensory fatigue. And previous studies have shown that children can categorize pictures of foods based on multiple dimensions, for example, healthiness and liking. And the method have shown to be promising for sensory characterization from a child's perspective, but quite few studies exist where children actually is tasting food. So I want to give you an example of a study that we did. And first, this picture just illustrates an example of the process. So the red figures here are products that are placed on the sheet according to their similarities and differences. And then for the analysis, you measure the X and Y coordinates as illustrated for the star here in the picture. So you do this for each and every one of the subjects included in the data collection. So we were working on a project with food with algae, and we had professional product developers creating 8 child-friendly school meal food prototypes containing seaweeds. And these prototypes contain between 10 and 15% seaweed. And we wanted to do analysis of these with children and decided to do a sorted napping. So please note that these products were quite different between each other. And we recruited 10 to 11-year-old children and tried to prepare them for the task. So we had close collaboration with the school and the teachers, which is often a success factor when doing sensory evaluation with children. Legal guardians, of course, provided informed consent. We also, of course, made sure to confirm that the children were willing to participate in the study. We made sure that all children should feel included, especially if we're in a school setting. So if a child was unable to taste a certain product due to allergies or did not want to taste the product for any reason, they were still welcome to participate to whatever extent they chose. So although incomplete evaluations results were excluded from the final data. And of course, we ensured the safety of the products in terms of microorganisms and potential harmful elements, which we might have in the seaweed samples, but these were completely safe. And we asked the children to taste the 8 prototypes and place them on the sheet according to similarities and differences, and also to, in their own words, motivate their placement. And we spent some time trying to figure out how to prepare the children for the task and make sure that they understood what kind of descriptors we were looking for. So we came up with the idea to create a film which explained the method. And the main character of this film was an alien that had never heard of our commonly consumed foods here on Earth. So we encouraged the children to imagine that they were describing these foods to the alien. So let's look at some of the results. So here we can see the sensory space based on the napping task. And the children have placed the products based on form, texture, and color. So falafel and sea nugget up in the upper left corner had a similar shape and texture, as did the salmon burger, lemon pea patty, and the cod burger on the bottom left. The samples to the right were liquid soups and smoothies. The smoothie and tomato soup were not similar taste-wise. However, texture-wise, they were more similar than the spinach soup. The spinach soup was more chunky and slimy. So when looking at the descriptors provided by the children, each child wrote on average 13 descriptors. And we classify these into 3 groups: analytical, hedonic, and other. That is, words that could not be classified as either analytical or hedonic. So over 300 attributes were classified as analytical. And although the children were instructed not to use hedonic descriptors, 22 of them were classified as pure hedonic, for example, unpleasant or perfectly seasoned. And the descriptors were related to both visual attributes, to texture, to taste, and to smell of the product, so all sensory modalities. The children often used actually existing foods to describe the products, such as looks like this or smells like this. With regards to the basic taste attributes, sweet, salty, bitter, and sour were mentioned, whereas umami was not specifically mentioned by any of the children. And that's interesting because seaweeds are supposedly rich in umami. And we could identify over 100 unique descriptors. And so they were put into an MFA analysis. And this is quite a messy plot when we use all the attributes. So to further improve interpretability, we classified the attributes into broader categories, ending up with 40 attributes. So in this MFA, you can see the projected points, which represents the samples and their final attributes. And the children actually also provided liking for the samples, and the highest liking was found for the falafel and sea nuggets. On this plot, you can see them down in the left corner, while particularly the lemon pea patty had very low liking, as did the cod burger and salmon burger. And we think that this method worked quite well with children. And as a next step, it would be interesting to explore how it works with products that are more similar to each other. And I want to highlight that when working with children, you may receive creative and quite unexpected descriptions. So here are some descriptors that did not make it to the MFA in their original form, but they are interesting anyway, I think. So one child described the sample as airplane food and rotten omelette, while another child used salad and green fish to describe a sample. Like blood was a descriptor that was used, and socks and sweat was another descriptor. So not perhaps the most positive words, but they are indeed quite creative, and you can kind of understand what they felt about the products. So despite these promising methods, there are still significant research gap, I think. So for example, with regards to sorted napping, flash profiling, RATA, and T-Kata. And second, I think we lack systematic comparisons to determine which methods works best for different age groups and different contexts. And finally, digitalization and gamification are proposed as future trends and possibilities, but almost no research has explored how these tools can improve engagement and data quality. So in our napping study, we instead actually chose to go by pen and paper to simplify the process for the children. But I'm excited to see more research and development of these methods, which I think are really valuable when working with children. So by that, I want to thank you so much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Pernilla. I can see there is a hands up. No, probably it was, I don't see questions.
we can discuss later as well.
Yes, I was confused about one emoji. And so we can move on. Now it's turn of Paula and Noelia. This is a presentation with two voices. The title is Measurement of Food-Related Emotions and Attitudes, Physiological, Implicit, and Explicit Methods. Thank you so much.
And I don't know that Noelia will start with a 10 minutes presentation, which will be followed by Paula Varela.
Yeah.
So the floor is yours, Noelia.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Monica. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
In presentation mode?
Looks
Okay,
good.
great. Yeah, thank you. Well, I am Noelia Da Quinta, and as Monica said, I'm here to talk about new approaches that I have developed in my PhD in AZTI, a research center in Spain, to measure food-evoke emotions in children using both implicit and explicit methods. So I would like to start this presentation by explaining or defining what is an emotion. An emotion is a short period of time during which different subsystems of the organism synchronize themselves in a response to a relevant and triggering event. So these subsystems that are activated, as you can see, are very varied. You have cognition to recognize the event, also a feeling about the event, how you feel, or how you feel about the event. Then you also have involuntary responses such as a physiological arousal that can be activated or deactivated. You also have action, which can be fight or flight action, and you also have a behavior that can be activated through this event, such as a change in body posture or a facial expression. So this multi-component inherent of the emotion leads to a different variety of methods that can be applied to measure emotions holistically. And all these methods can be grouped in three categories, which are the cognitive methods, physiological, and behavioral methods. And here you have in this slide, highlighted in yellow, the ones that I chose to use and apply, to develop and apply to study food-evoke emotions in children during my PhD, which were emoji, skin conductance response, and facial coding. So all the information I'm going to explain in this presentation came from my PhD thesis, and I'm only going to give you an overview of how we conducted the development of these new approaches to work with children, and a small glance about the results that we obtained. But if you want to know, to deepen into this information or to know more about the results, you can ask me, of course, or you can have a look at the papers. So the first method that we conducted to work with the children was a cognitive approach based on emoji. And for this, we decided to use facial emoji because it's not verbal, intuitive for the children, and resembles facial expressions, which are supposed to be easy to interpret. But scientific publications has also highlight several limitations for the use of emoji with both adults and children, which mainly summarizes that in clear sentiment and significant meaning, which mainly depends on socio-demographical variables such as the age of the children, the gender of the children, but also the context in which the imageries or the emoji are used, or the language of the children. So our approach, the approach that we use in my PhD, suggested the first thing that suggested was to conduct a study to evaluate the sentiment and semantic meaning of the emoji, how children perceive this emoji in a situation without a context. Then we evaluate the effect of the age. The children were school age children with from 6 to 12 years old, but also the effect of gender and the food context on this meaning. And once that we have all this work done, we decided to identify food-related emoji, to select only the ones that we wanted to use in subsequent studies with food products. So here you have some graphs about the results that we obtained during all this process. Here you have results about the evaluation of the sentiment and semantic meaning of the emoji in a food context. You can see that the sentiment was evaluated and arousal as balance. The semantic meaning was provided as spontaneous words for the children. And here you have the results, or some results about the evaluation of the effect of age in this semantic meaning of the emoji. Of course, we have a lot of results, but as I said, please go to the papers if you want to know more. I have to admit that the effect of age, gender, and the food context in the meaning of the emoji was confirmed in every case. So it was nice to know that. And once that we have understood how children perceive the emoji, we evoke a selection of food context, a variety of food context you can see here in this table, and identify which emoji were more frequently associated to describe a food experience in these situations. And the emoji that were more frequently selected was chosen for this final tool that we created, and were these 14 emoji that you have here in the lower part of the slide. And these 14 emoji were the ones that we use and apply then in the studies, in food studies. So to describe the second approach that we define in all this created in my PhD, it was a behavioral approach based on facial coding. Facial coding, it's a methodology that identifies and monitors changes in the specific points of the face, which are called action units, and then translate this information into emotions. The main limitation of this methodology for both application in adults and also in children is the reliability, the lack of context for the moment in which the measure is taken. You don't know what triggers the change in the facial expression, and also very relevant in the food domain, the artifacts that are caused in the facial expression when you are chewing or processing the food. So our approach in this case was firstly to validate the software that we decided to use for this study using standardized databases in a complete study with children. Then to provide some information about the context, we decided to mark everything that happens during the tasting sessions that was relevant as an event in the study. So, for example, when a child smelled the product or touch it with the hand, and these type of actions were marked in the event, so we know that all facial expressions that were measured were because of these actions. And to prevent the artifacts from chewing and oral processing, we designed a new data analysis that was based on raw data provided by the specific action units in the face and not the emotions that the software provide, because this way we can choose the action units that were not affected by chewing and the oral processing, and not considering all the face, in the analysis. So I'm going to explain a little bit how we did this, because it was interesting. For this analysis, we started by a literature review on physiology to identify the facial muscles that are involved in chewing and oral processing. Then we associate the action units that are affected by the movement of these facial muscles. And in the end, we identify the ones that were not affected by these facial muscles, and those were the ones that we decided to use for the analysis, which in the end were the upper side of the face, as you can see here in the slide. So the last approach that we designed for this study with children were the measure of skin conductance response, which is an electrical property of the skin related to the sweating activity, and can be unconsciously generated in response to a triggering event that is also relevant for the children. So the main limitation of this methodology is the individual differences that exist between people, which hinders a lot the data comparison of results. So our approach for this trying to solve this limitation was to set a new protocol for the testing for the sessions, which started with a hands washing to set a common baseline in skin conductance response for all the children. Then we set an arousing task for all the children again, that establish a theoretical maximum skin conductance response caused by this exciting activity. And these two stages set a range that was specific for every children that took part in the study. So all the measures that we measure, all the data that we measure during the study caused by a food product or the event that we mark during the test fall within this range and can be expressed as a relative measure, and this way we can compare the data from one children to another. And once that we develop all these three approaches, we apply them in several studies to study the emotions elicited by food names with images and real food samples with children. And here you have some results that we obtained for the studies conducted with emoji and food names and images. Also for facial coding and skin conductance response, in this case for real food samples that were only different in textures. There were three liquid textures. Interestingly, when we apply the facial coding and skin conductance response, we can also, apart from the emotional profile provided by elicited by the samples, we also obtain information about the dynamics of the emotion, so how the emotion evolved during the time of the exposure. And of course, we also conducted one final study in which we merge all the three approaches. And it was really nice to also see that we obtained a good discrimination of samples, and we were able to obtain also the emotional profiles. So in conclusion, the combination of these three approaches allow us to evaluate the food evoke emotions holistically with the three types of methods that can be applied. And we also provide a promising solution to overcome the limitations that are frequently associated with these methods. And that's all from me. Thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any questions, you can ask me now or in the end, or contact me by any means. So thanks. I'm going to stop sharing because I can see you. I don't know if you have any questions or no. Yeah.
Maybe we take the questions together at
Yeah.
the end or with everyone at the end. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
I don't see question anyway in the chat for the moment. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Noelia. And now it's time for Paula
You
to
see
continue.
my presentation now? Yes.
Yes, it looks good.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, everyone. So I will continue a bit with the same topic as Noelia on indirect methods, in this case with pre-adolescents, how to measure without asking. The results I'm presenting here are two examples that were part of two master theses and one PhD thesis in a big European project. We had the EDULIA project, and they are both published in the papers that are now on screen. So you can get more information there if you're interested, and of course you can ask us. So the first example is the use of indirect methods to study food preferences and health perception in pre-adolescents. So we did this study with 9 and 10 years old, and the direct measurements were acceptance, healthiness perception, and different attitudes measurements with questionnaires. And indirect measurements, we used face reading and eye tracking. This was an interesting example because the face reading was also done together with tasting of samples. That is not an easy task, even with adults. So we had the tasting of samples to measure liking, and we also had pack evaluation that was on screen to measure healthiness perception. So the children also answered to liking or healthiness using scales that you see at the bottom of the screen. And the idea was to measure intrinsic and extrinsic product properties. So this is the setup that you see on the screen. So there was an eye tracker. We also made skin conductance measurements, but I'm not presenting this to you. And you see where the web camera is to analyze the facial expressions. So eye tracking we used to look what do they observe to assess how much they like the product or how healthy it is. So you see the heat maps generated by the eye tracker there, and you see also the average expected acceptance and healthiness perception for the chocolate milk package. So what we did is we had the same milk package that we modified the figure, so it was either a cartoon or some cocoa beans, but we also had a message of mystic smack, so it's like a secret or surprising flavor. We had also with and without sugar that was communicated in the pack. So what we see is when you see the heat maps, when there is redder is where the children look at more frequently and during and for longer, and green and yellow is where they looked less at. So they perceive the pack with cocoa beans as the healthiest, but the higher acceptance with the pack with a cartoon. And also the higher liking for the cartoon was decided faster. So they were more sure that they would like better the chocolate milk with a cartoon as compared to the cocoa beans. We use the same type of samples for tasting, and we use face reading to look at the facial expressions. So for that, we had 6 samples, 3 with sugar, 3 without sugar. 2 of them didn't have any flavor, and the other had either peppermint or licorice. So we wanted to use some flavors that were maybe unexpected in a chocolate milk to create also emotions, but also that they were together, work well together with the chocolate milk. So we work with some product developers in the dairy industry for that. So the test followed the following instructions. So they needed to find the sample and show it to the camera. There was an instructional film for the tasting to be able to measure the emotions. So as you see here, so there was a video where this lady would have the sample very slowly to their mouth and to taste it, and the children needed to follow the same tempo. And after that, they need to show an explicit facial expression. So we asked them to make a face that would represent the tasting of the sample. There was a direct measurement of acceptability. And after that, they did the extrinsic part. So what was their unconscious reaction when they taste the chocolate milk? Joy was linked to higher acceptance. Anger, sadness, and disgust were linked to less liked samples. But we also saw that explicit basic emotions were more sensitive than liking ratings for sample discrimination and more sensitive than the implicit. So when we asked them to make an explicit emotion face to the camera, it was highly correlated to the implicit one, but had more discrimination. So this has been also reported for adults. In the past, not many papers look at that, but at least a couple show that for adults and for pre-adolescent, this can work. So the next example is the use of implicit methods to study preferences and attitudes towards sweet foods in pre-adolescents. So we use direct measurements and attitude questionnaires, health and taste, craving for sweet food, and using food as reward. We made preference tests, blind preference with tasting. These were the samples with and without sugar, so the same as before, but we didn't have the flavored ones. Only 2 samples were used here. And we also had a take-home preference with the real packs, so they could choose between these two packs as a price for participation. And we measured that as a take-home preference. So there was the sample with and without sugar that were existing in the market. And indirect measurements, we use approach avoidance task, where they use a joystick that they can bring to them, or push or pull if they following some instructions. So in this case, they needed to push or pull if they saw either an object or a snack. So you see here some examples. So in this case, for example, an object is a teapot, and the snack is this yogurt or with some caramels on top. So the stimuli were selected from a database, and the measurements is reaction time and error rate to measure approach bias. So then we subtract the pull versus push reaction times. And the research questions was, is there an approach bias to sweet versus not sweet food? And is there a link to the explicit attitudes and preferences that we measured with the chocolate milks? So we use FoodPix, that is a database with standardized images of food and non-food. And the design of experiments, we had high calorie and low calorie foods with high sweetness and low sweetness. And for all the food images, we will have also a non-food, or an object that resemble the image of the food, to be able to measure the approach bias. So the results, very briefly, we could group the children, those with and without approach bias for sweet food. And we saw that the children with an approach bias towards sweet food had lower health interest, greater reward behavior, and more preferred chocolate milk with sugar. We didn't see any significant correlation between the approach bias and the take-home preference. There could be many explanations, like peer pressure, because they were together when taking the take-home sample, social desirability, expectations, so many things could have played a role there. So in conclusion, indirect measures like eye tracking, face reading, and implicit methods prove useful as complementary ways of looking into attitudes, perception, and preferences, and they were linked to pre-adolescents' food choices. So thanks for the attention, and also I'm ready for questions if you have some, or at the end.
Thank you so much, Paula. Jonah, do we have any questions in the chat?
No, there are no questions for the moment.
Let's save them for the discussion later. So now I'm happy to welcome the next couple of speakers, and we will talk about co-creation approaches, and we will listen to Sara Spinelli and Caterina Dinnella from University of Florence in Italy. So we're happy to have you here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Pernilla. So I'm sharing the screen. Okay, so our presentation that we will do, myself and Caterina Dinnella, is on new approaches for co-created sustainable and healthy tailor-made food for children. So first, something that is preliminary. It's important that when we work on innovation, we need to consider a variable that is always very important for children in particular, that is food neophobia, that is reluctance to consume and try new food or unfamiliar foods. here you can see a trajectory of the over the lifespan that is part of another project that we are doing in collaboration with the Children Working Group and the Taste Sensitivity and Personality Working Group. And you can see that food neophobia is quite high at the early in life, and while it decreases when you become adult. So if you are innovating for children, you need to consider food neophobia, and usually it's not done in this way. Usually it's neglected, while we need to develop new food also for food neophobics. So how we can do this? Co-creation is a technique that can be very useful. Co-creation is part of the citizen science approaches. It's a participatory technique that integrates all the stakeholders, including the final end user, in the development of the innovation. What we did was, in considering this approach and integrating this approach with another opposite approach, that is the one based on jobs to be done. Jobs to be done is a technique developed in the economic realm, and it's in its definition is the opposite of co-creation, because it implies that you don't ask to people what they want, but it's based on observation, and observation of the role of products played in the life of the people. So jobs are considered that jobs of the product. The product have to do jobs, and so you need to identify which are the jobs that this product can do in the life of the users. So we merged these techniques and with the objective of developing a legume-based dishes with traditional legumes, not the new innovative ingredient based on legumes, and combining this type of techniques with children of the elementary school 8 to 10. So the project was quite complex, and it includes a variety of methodologies. And first, we started with the identification of opportunity and the development of concept through focus group with children and chef specialized in food services in school canteen, because the objective was to develop these new dishes to be introduced in the school canteen, because usually the dishes with legumes, they are not very well accepted. So secondly, we refine and screen this concept to select some on which we were working also with the chef to assess feasibility, sustainability, and all the aspects that we consider also to select the dishes. And then at the end, we tested the prototype. Then later, the prototype selected was introduced in the canteen, in the normal routine of the canteen, and this part will be presented by Caterina later. So in total, we involved over 280 children that participated in the different phases. So just to give you some quick information about how it was done and some results. So these are some photos of different phases. So we had the group interviews using qualitative methods to identify the information that were and the emotional association with the legumes. We used the jobs to be done approach to identify what are the role of the food and based on legumes for these children. So it must associate, give satisfaction, not frighten. It should be related also to fun, and there was a lot of reports related to this. Then we use free association task on legumes to understand not only how much they were familiar, but also which were the emotional association with this. And then we used the scamper technique. Here I give you some example. That is that we worked in groups and we asked to the group to propose to choose one ingredient, one legume ingredient, and then to choose which other ingredient they would use together, and then to build together the dish instead of asking think about a new dish, because they cannot do this task. And it's more effective if you go with an indirect technique. And then you ask to change, to make variants, to refine the concept. Then this concept were then developed in real concept description, and they were tested. There were quite a lot of concepts that were refined and arrived at this phase of screening. And here you can see that this was the evaluation of willingness to try of all the concepts developed with presented with description, so not tested in this phase, considering separately the children higher in neophobia and lower in neophobia. So as we expected, the children higher in food neophobia, they have a lower willingness to try the new food. But you can see here that there are some products, some dishes that actually they are very well accepted in terms of willingness to try, because we have also something that is around 7 in the mean. But so we have a group of products that are above the neutral point of the scale, so that they could try or not refuse to try. So because we adopted this approach of tailor-made, we selected the products not that were on average more accepted, because this would be driven by the children lower in neophobia, but we selected instead the product that were accepted also or not rejected by the children with higher food neophobia. Then we worked on it further with the chef to translate this in recipes, and that were feasible. And then we evaluated the sensory properties and the acceptability and the emotion associated with these prototypes. And to measure emotion, we used this method that was developed in the same project that Paula mentioned that she was leading. That is Edulia project, and it was the emoji pair questionnaire, in which emoji they were identified through a quite complex study. But at the end, we developed this question in which we present 2 emoji together to clarify their meaning in a way that it could be easier to understand what they mean. And no words are present in this questionnaire. This is just to explain the meaning associated. What we found, even in this case, observing the differences between children higher and lower in food neophobia, is that we can identify products. This is again in the phase of the concept, that they were associated with positive emotion also for children higher in food neophobia, and this information also was considered for the selection. And then I just want to give you some information about the results. Then, as I said, these prototypes were developed. They were these 7 developed and tasted by children, by more than 100 children in the school. And then we tested liking, and you can see that there are, on average, there are many that are accepted, and or also not rejected. And actually only so they are not even the one that are like less, they are around the mean point of the scale, so they could be, for example, further optimized and not rejected. Of course, we saw that on average there is, so children higher in neophobia, they like everything less, but we did not find an effect specific for one product, so an interaction. And so we can this was related on how this was developed based on this tailor-made approach. So I leave the stage to Caterina that will show you some result of the next phase, in which the selected product was then introduced in the school canteen.
Good, thank you, Sara. And then, yes, I'll ask Sara to go through my slides. So this was the dish which was selected to be included in the regular menu offer. And this selection was based on several criteria. First one was that this was one of the dishes accepted by the more neophobic children. And also we considered that this dish was in line with jobs to be done in terms of appealing for sensory properties, for example, and also about the possibility children express in terms of personalize their choice. And in this case, dish can be personalized by using different sauce with different flavor. And also, of course, we had to consider and compromise for the choice with the need of the canteen company. And in this case, for this dish, it was ready to be produced and to be used in the spring menu of 2025, so last year. It was compliant with logistic and supply restriction of the canteen company. Can you go on? Okay, this is the experimental design, and we collected several data comparing the innovative dish with the regular offer of legume-based dish in the school canteen. So the data collection lasted 6 weeks, and we collect data 3 times from the innovative dish with slight modification in its formulation, because it was, this is a part of co-creation actually, because when passing from the prototype production to production on large scale, as in the case of production for a real canteen, it was necessary to adjust a little bit the formulation to be always in the same sensory space of the prototype, so in terms of texture or flavor and so on. So we have 3 versions of the prototype, and was compared with 3 legume-based offer in the menu. And no, sorry, these were characterized for liking, emotions, sensory attributes, and also we measured the uneaten amount. And the children were characterized for neophobia, of course, also eating rate and familiarity with legumes. And yes, I'll show you just few results from this quite big study. Yes, next. Thank you. Yeah. Yes, this is the sample. So around more than 200 children participated in the study, and the age was from 8 to 11 actually. And you can see that the sample was quite well balanced, either in terms of age and in terms of gender. the previous one. Okay. Yes, this is the liking, and we tested the neophobia level effect on liking for all the dish offered in the canteen setting, and as expected, we observed almost the same that Sara explained for the concept. So high neophobic children rated liking lower than low neophobic children, and we do not see any significant effect dish for neophobia, so saying that the behavior was almost the same. I mean, the liking rate followed the same trend in all the dishes for both high neophobic and low neophobic children. So high neophobic children tested lower all the dish in respect to low neophobic children. And we investigate a little bit more this aspect. You can change. And we compare liking in terms of liking for the traditional dish, so dish that were already present in the menu offer from several time actually, so legume dish to which children were exposed several times in the past, with the innovative dish. And we see that when we compare these aggregate results, we see that for low neophobic children, there are no difference between innovative, I could say, and traditional legume-based dish. On the other hand, for high neophobic children, difference is they rated liking lower for the innovative dish. But still, you can see that liking is around the middle point of the scale. So yes, liking is lower, but still this dish can be considered accepted. Next, this is about the uneaten amount. And yes, here the picture is a little bit more complicated. And you see that, of course, the amount of uneaten amount is much higher, actually. Even if liking ratings are not so different, actually we have a quite big difference in the amount uneaten, with a higher waste in high neophobic children in respect to low neophobic children. Go. Yes, and then we try to investigate how these dishes were perceived by high and low neophobic children. So first in terms of emotion elicited by this dish. And using the questionnaire Sara mentioned, here you can see the results of this kata emoji questionnaire relevant to low neophobic children. And we can see that low neophobic children actually use a relatively low amount of emoji to discriminate among dishes, but it's really interesting to see that the new dishes, which is the rice cake version 1, 2, and 3, are on the same side of the most preferred dish, which is this bean soup, and is associated to positive emotion. On the other hand, we have bean and spinach and chickpeas. So these are the traditional offer of the school canteen, which are associated to negative emotion, and also negative emotion with high arousal. So they are, I would say, from the emotional point of view, they are rejected in some way. If we look at the profile of yes, thank you. No? Okay, thank you very much. And when we look at the high neophobic children, we see that they use a higher amount of emoji to discriminate among the dishes, and they use actually a higher amount of positive emoji. And we see the same trend in terms of emoji associated to the most preferred, which is the bean soup, and the least preferred, which is the bean and spinach dishes. And the new dishes, so the rice cake, actually are in the center of the model. These possibly underlie quite varied individual responses among more neophobic children in terms of emoji associated with the new dish. And yes, yes, this is just to summarize how the emotional profile was not exactly the same for more neophobic and less neophobic children. And just to go on, and then, yes, we also compare the sensory description between more neophobic children and less neophobic children, because the hypothesis was that high neophobic children could perceive actually differently from low neophobic children, and this could explain the negative emotion, the higher amount of uneaten dishes, lower liking, and so on. But actually, the sensory description is the same if we compare the configuration of high and low neophobic children. So, just to conclude, a few conclusive remarks about this project with children from primary school. And we can say that co-creation as a multi-actor approach proved to be effective in developing legume-based dish both acceptable to target population. And also, this is very important, this due to the involvement of the canteen company, the catering company. This prototype have been readily implemented and included in the menu offer. And yes, of course, food neophobia is an important barrier, is still a challenge to develop, to innovate for high neophobic children. But yes, we can say that co-creation approach can meet, and so development of co-created dish, which take in consideration needs and expectation of the more neophobic children of the population, yes, can mitigate the effect of high neophobia level. And in that, as a methodology, we have to say that all the measures are important, and liking, plate waste, emotional responses, and sensory profile, all these measures are relevant for understanding factors influencing dish performance. So thank you very much for your attention, and and also thanks to the quite big team who made possible to collect this data last spring. Thank you.
Thank you, Caterina. Thank you, Sara.
Yes.
Thank you to all the speakers.
Thank you so much. We have about 10 minutes left of this webinar, and we will spend these 10 minutes to have an open discussion. And first, I want to ask you, Jonah, whether there are any questions in the chat to any of the speakers.
Yes, we have two questions. One from Lauren in the Q&A session. And the question is for all speakers. What do you think is the most enjoyable aspect of working with children? And then we have another question, but I think we can read after.
Mm-hmm. Anyone that has a spontaneous comment to enjoy? So I think I can start, but I think, as I also gave an example of, that you sometimes get very unexpected answers from the children that you couldn't imagine in beforehand, and that's often quite fun and enjoyable. And I also I've mostly been working with children in the age of 8 to 10, 11, and they are usually super motivated. They think it's fun and enjoyable to take part of these studies, and I think they find it important to contribute to the research as well. So it's quite delightful working with the children.
Yeah, maybe I can say I can join the same. It's really cool, and one of the things that Monica highlighted, that it's still a lot to study with pre-adolescents and adolescents, and I think particularly that age group is really cool to work with. A lot of unexpected reactions that, of course, make you think also in the methodological aspects, because maybe you have a very good plan, and then when you start piloting, you realize, okay, the plan was in fact not good at all, and you need to rethink everything. It's a really nice age to work, particularly with co-creation groups, workshops, these implicit or indirect methods. So methods that are new and challenging also for them are quite cool to work with.
Any other comments on this?
Yeah, I just two things. One is thinking about what Monica said at the beginning. So we tend to consider age group the same cognitive, for example, level when we consider 9, 10, 8, but in fact, this is not the case. So as a researcher, we should pay a lot of attention when we work with children to consider appropriately each age group, because according to our experience, for example, children 8 are pretty different from children 9 and 10. So this is something to think about. So when we develop new methodology and so on, it's important really, also as Paula said, so you start with something and then you have to adapt according to the responses that you receive from children. And also, for example, in our experience using digital tool to collect data, so we use tablet, for example, and we found this very engaging for children. So they were happy to use tablet, and they were happy, for example, to use questionnaire with emoji and so on. So this is something that we have to consider. So the tool we use to collect the measure we are interested in. Otherwise, children, they became very quickly bored, and yes, and you lose them. So that's
yeah. And maybe I can also add that even though perhaps you only have collect data from children that are 8 years old, there's also an individual variation in the children, that some children might need more support in how to perform the tasks, and some might need less. So you need to have kind of a bit of a sensitivity to that aspect as well.
Yes. And if I can add something, I totally agree with you. And it seems very challenging to work with children. So sometimes it's very difficult, but it is very satisfying, because if you think that if you take into account all these aspects, so you really think about the methodological perspective, and you take into account the intersubjectivity, and you really use a methodology that is effective with them. They are very reliable, very honest, and so it's very satisfying to work with them. But yeah, it's not the easiest task for sensory scientists, but I think the most satisfying. Well, thank you for this general question, because it was very nice to answer, because it makes you realize how nice it is to work with them. I have seen another question in I'm not sure it was the chat, but I read it very quickly, but then disappeared. So I don't know if you have taken.
Yeah, we have other two questions. One in the chat from Afsha. And the question is, with the NumPy scale, what was that was used? Did you use emojis or just words? I think they refer to Caterina or Sara presentation.
Yes.
No, in our case, we use this questionnaire, validated questionnaire for emoji relevant for to describe food experience with children of that age. No, I don't know, Sara, if you want to add something.
So I think that if I understand the question, that the 9-point scale was the liking scale, and we used the not with emoji in this case, with words, with the anchors, and then we used the emoji questionnaire. We didn't use the emoji in the scale of liking because we used the emoji to measure the emotions, so otherwise it would have been confused. And then for the emoji we use the check-all that apply emoji per questionnaire. So with the emoji presented in pairs with no words. If this was, if I understood the question.
Other questions? Still a few minutes.
I have another question from Anonymous. Where are the challenges in instructing children to follow guidelines?
Well, in my experience, it was really difficult to work with children and to make sure that they follow the guidelines in the study. We used, as I mentioned in my presentation, several protocols, new protocols, and we need that the children, for example, to measure skin conductance response, you need to be pretty still. You need to make sure that the hand is not moving during the test, because otherwise you can make an assumption that something is happening that is not going on. And we may try to make the children be still, quiet during the test, but as Pernilla said, you need to be sensitive with the children. Not you cannot be all the time telling the children, trying not to move. You have to be play slow, during the test and so on. So it was really complicated. In the end, we try to tell the children to be to not to move a couple of times during the test, and if we see that the children was unable to play still, we follow the testing session. We continue with the testing session, and in the end we delete the data, because otherwise it was messy and it was really complicated. And something similar happened, at least in our experience, with facial coding as well. Children tend to move the head all the time and play with the camera, because they are seeing the camera in the end in the computer and the monitor. So it was nice for them, but also tricky.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I have experience from collecting data in schools, and I think it's good to have the teacher around. So that's one key success factor, I think, and also perhaps spend some time familiarizing the child kind of with the task. It might take a little bit more time than when collecting data from adults, but my experience from working with adults is that they also sometimes misinterpret instructions. So it's not only children that are difficult, but of course there's some other challenges with children as well.
Maybe I can also comment that for our experience, of course, very different if you work with young or preschooler or young children in school age, and you work with pre-adolescents. So with pre-adolescents or adolescents, I think the main challenge is when they get bored for different reasons, and if they need to read a lot. So, for example, in the applications I showed today, answering questionnaires about attitudes, not fun. So you never know if, the responses have been really thought of, or how much have they read the questions. But when they are happy and they are enjoying the task, as implicit methods, or as face reading, even when they needed to stay still because of the skin conductance and things like that, they thought that was cool. So it was much easier to work with them. And even with adolescents and pre-adolescents, another thing I can mention is that one shouldn't underestimate the reading issues, not necessarily because they cannot read. Is because of the attention span and maybe some difficult words. So even with pre-adolescents, you need to really pilot the questionnaire and maybe work with the teachers to ensure that they can read that, and that the reading level is adapted even for 12 years old, that you would think, okay, they can read quite well, but not necessarily a long attitudinal questionnaire. So that's also maybe something to mention.
Thank you, Paula. So we're getting close to, we need to close the session very soon, right, Monica? So it's now 16 minutes past 11. But if anyone is interested to continue the discussion, you can reach out to us in the Children's Working Group and become a member through your Natural Society and E3S. And we want to thank all the speakers and Ejona for helping us organize this, and the board of E3S. Is it anything more we want to say, Monica?
I want to thank everybody for being with us for this webinar, and especially the speakers. It's always nice to meet, even if in remote mode. So thank you again, and hope to see you in Zurich.
Thanks for the organization.
Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Just an information for participants, if someone doesn't left again, that this webinar has been recorded and will be shared on our YouTube channel and our website.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Ok, ciao Sara.
Ciao, allora abbiamo fatto, tanto pensavo rimanesse un secondo. Ok.
Aspetta.
Ciao.